Who's in my bed every night? A father tucked his 7-year-old son into bed. It was their special ritual, and without it, the boy would struggle to fall asleep. One evening, the father entered the dimly lit room to find his son already under the covers, waiting for him. Something felt off. The boy looked the same, but his grin stretched unnaturally wide, from ear to ear. "You okay, buddy?" Father asked, trying to shake the unease creeping over him. The boy nodded, still grinning, and said, "Daddy, can you check for monsters under my bed?" The father chuckled softly, humoring his son. He knelt down and lifted the edge of the blanket to peek underneath. There, trembling and pale, was his real son. The boy whispered, "Daddy, there's someone on my bed." And hikers set out on a solo trek through the mountains, something he rarely did. The day passed uneventfully, surrounded by towering trees and the peaceful sounds of nature. But as dusk fell, he realized he was lost. The trail back to his car was nowhere to be found, and panic began to set in. With only a flashlight to guide him, he stumbled through the darkening forest. Just as he was about to give up hope, he spotted a dilapidated cabin. It looked abandoned, but it was his only chance for shelter. He knocked, but no one answered. Reluctantly, he stepped inside. The cabin was eerily quiet, with a single bed in the center of the room. The walls were adorned with portraits of strange, smiling figures whose eyes seemed to follow him. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the bed, trying to ignore the unsettling paintings. The next morning, he woke to sunlight streaming through the room. But the paintings were gone. In their place were windows, and outside, the same smiling faces peered in the thread wristbands. In a hospital where patients were tagged with colored wristbands, green for the living, red for the deceased, a doctor was tasked with retrieving supplies from the basement one night. As he stepped into the elevator, he noticed a woman already inside. She didn't press any buttons, so he assumed she was also heading to the basement. The elevator descended, and when the doors opened, the doctor saw a man limping toward them. His wristband was red. Panicked, the doctor slammed the button to close the doors. "Why did you do that?" "He was trying to use the elevator," the woman said, annoyed. "Did you see his wristband?" The doctor replied. "It was red. He died last night. I performed his surgery." The woman lifted her wrist, revealing a red band. She smiled. "Like this one?" Over. A man moved into a new apartment and was handed his keys by the receptionist, who warned him not to disturb the unmarked door on his floor. Intrigued, he decided to investigate after settling in. The door was locked, so he knelt and peered through the keyhole. Inside, he saw a pale woman with long black hair standing motionless in the corner facing the wall. Feeling guilty for intruding, he backed away. The next day, curiosity got the better of him. He looked through the keyhole again, but this time, all he saw was red. Assuming the woman had covered the hole, he went to the receptionist for answers. She sighed. "You looked through the keyhole, didn't you?" When he admitted it, she explained that the apartment had once been home to a couple with pale skin, black hair, and red eyes. The husband had gone mad and killed his wife. Some others call it. The girl was upstairs in her room working on homework when she heard her mother call her down for dinner. She got up and headed for the stairs, but before she could take a step, hands grabbed her and pulled her into the laundry room. It was her mother, her real mother, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "Don't go down there, honey," she whispered. I heard it too. My mother attracted evil. After my parents divorced during my teenage years, I moved in with my mother. At first, it seemed like a fresh start, but it didn't take long for strange things to happen, things I couldn't explain. Our apartment became a place where the ordinary twisted into the unsettling, and I began to feel like we weren't alone. It started subtly. Maybe lying in bed reading a book when the room would suddenly grow icy cold. The kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made your breath visible. Then came the feeling of being watched. Not just watched, but it was as if something invisible was glaring at me with pure malice. I'd try to brush it off, but the weight of that gaze was unbearable. I'd leave the room, sometimes for hours, just to escape it. During the day, I'd catch glimpses of shadowy figures darting along the walls of my bedroom. They moved too quickly to make out clearly, but their presence was undeniable. I told myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew better. The worst was when something began mimicking my dog. One night, I walked into my room and heard a low, guttural growl coming from under the bed. It was too deep, too menacing to be my dog. He was a small, gentle creature, incapable of making such a sound. It was as if a massive, unseen beast was lurking there, or maybe even a person trying to imitate an animal. I froze, my heart pounding, before backing out of the room and slamming the door shut. Other times, my dog would whimper and pace nervously in the room next to mine. I'd call for him, but he wouldn't come, as if something in the hallway was blocking him. His fear was palpable, and it only made me more uneasy. The breaking point came when I realized the activity seemed to revolve around my mother. She never spoke about it, but I could tell she felt it too. There was a heaviness in the air whenever she was around, a sense that something dark was clinging to her. When I finally moved in with my father, the paranormal activity stopped completely. The icy chills, the shadowy figures, the growls, they all vanished. It was as if whatever had been haunting us couldn't follow me there. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that apartment. All I know is that my mother seemed to attract something evil, and I was caught in its crosshairs. I've never looked at her the same way since,